In the once hallowed halls of education, prestige has crumbled to dust. Students are now more interested in identity politics and social justice than their own education. Ever since Hamas attacked Israel, a wave of protests have swept through university and college campuses. These protests highlighting the education system's long march to the left. Once known for its prestige, Harvard University has become a hub for anti-Israel and pro-Hamas protests.
You don't, clearly.
I love Hamas. I think Hamas...
Oh, you love a terrorist organization. Interesting. Harvard Square, everyone.
I think Hamas should blow
Harvard
up
Square.
Israel. I think they're all dirty animals.
That's not
they all deserve to
anti-Semitism?
die.
That's not anti-Semitism?
For real, they should be all exterminated.
Thank you.
Every single one of them. And their kids, their mothers, their children, everybody. Just like Hitler
Thank you
did.
for proving our point.
Harvard student groups drew backlash for signing onto a statement that they hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence in the wake of the deadly attacks. A former university president was just one of many who spoke out against the statement.
What we're seeing play out to some degree is the continued manifestation of the oppressor-oppressed narrative that's so characteristic of the totalitarian left. And in its latest guise, it's the Palestinians are playing the role of the unjustly oppressed. And once you accept that story, well, it's easy to get your back up about it, and there are reasons for that. But, you know, I would say at the same time, a lot of the pretensions of the authoritarian left have been stripped away in the last month. You know, institutions like Harvard have taken what might be permanent stains on their reputation as a consequence of being a little bit too ideological in their approach.
This is what happens when you have a generation of bored, useless, and overcoddled snowflakes who don't believe in God and they want to feel like they are part of something. These are the same young morons who were out on the streets rioting for BLM a couple years ago, and now they are willing to jump on the anti-Semitic bandwagon to riot or just protest in some cases against Israel. These same people who are out there, I guarantee you, Chris, if you ask these young people anything about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they couldn't tell you anything. They have no idea why they are out there, other than the fact that they are intent on tearing down Western civilization, and they are obsessed with the hierarchy of victimhood and intersectionality. This is about far leftism, and it leads to very ugly places. I have Jewish friends all around the country who are scared of where this is going and frankly terrified that soon they might start rounding up the Jews. This is very dark stuff that's going on all around the world, particularly in Western countries right now.
Harvard, of course, you had 31 student groups sign this repulsive, disgusting letter saying that Israel bore the entire blame for the massacre, the pogrom inflicted on its own citizens. At Cornell University, another Ivy League school, you had a history professor by the name of Russell Rickford who said that he found it awesome and exhilarating to watch those Hamas jihadist paragliders swoon in on this concert, mowing down 260 innocent lives, raping God knows how many others. And the list just goes on and on and on. There's a professor at Columbia University who said something very similar. But it's not just the professors. Again, it's the students themselves. We've seen at least 30, I think closer probably to 35 to 40 Students for Justice in Palestine, student chapters all across America who unequivocally said they stand with Gaza. They stand with Hamas because this is justified resistance. Look, Hamas is indistinguishable from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or any other genocidal form of Islamist Sunni jihadist outfit. It is a U.S., EU recognized terrorist group. And, you know, look, unfortunately, on the American University campus, there is a long and inglorious history of standing with forces of civilizational arson and, frankly, just all-out evil. I mean, go back to the 1960s, really kind of the beginning of the modern campus radicals. They were standing with folks like Angela Davis, Assata Shakur. I mean, they stood with terrorists back then. They defended Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground, the domestic bombings. They defended all of that back then. So I guess it's only kind of the natural progression that they would get to where we are now, where you see legitimate defenses of genocide against the Jewish people on some of America's purportedly most prestigious university campuses. It's just appalling.
A shocking poll found amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, 48% supported the terrorist organization Hamas over Israel.
It's evidence of how severely our students and young learners have been brainwashed. Again, against all facts, against all reason. They have been brainwashed through, first defending violence with BLM protest. No, if one little group feels as though they're oppressed, then violence is absolutely okay, and it's not okay. No. But our children have been brainwashed to feel that way.
And this is a result of the anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Western civilization that we've seen in our culture being pushed in the education system. And we got to get back to the assimilation process, because assimilation is what's essential.
At Cornell University in New York, a series of threats made against Jewish students were uncovered in the wake of the attacks. This resulted in the school having to issue a warning for Jewish students and staff to avoid the building. A man has since been arrested over these threats made and will remain behind bars.
Jew hatred on the American university campus is not exactly a new phenomenon. What is new, I think, is just how bad it has gotten. It has gotten increasingly totally intolerable. I mean, I hear from friends who are in college, who are in law school and graduate school right now, that they are borderline afraid sometimes to just show up to class and to wear a Magen David, wear a kippah, wear any kind of indication that they are Jewish.
We don't want Israel to exist. We don't want these Zionist counter-protesters to exist.
I've always thought that the whole idea of proportionality in conflict is absurd. It's something which I think Western countries and the UN, who always gang up on Israel whenever Israel is attacked, it's something that these people always obsess about only in the case of Israel. We in Western democracies, whenever we've had to wage war in the past, do not say, is this entirely proportionate in a response? Because proportionate is an abstract idea. What is proportionate in a conflict? Proportionate in this conflict would mean that the response to the massacre of more than 1,000 Israelis in cold blood by Hamas a couple of weeks ago should be responded to by Israel by sending Israeli forces to rape exactly the same number of women as Hamas raped, and to decapitate exactly the same number of babies as Hamas decapitated, and to steal hundreds of Palestinians and hold them in dungeons and torture them as Hamas did. I mean, it's obscene to even think in these terms, and yet that's what proportionality would mean in this conflict. When people say proportionate, that the Israeli response must be proportionate, there are several things they're doing. One is that they are showing that they are utter ignoramuses, because they know nothing about Israel's wars since 1948, when its neighbors have repeatedly attempted to annihilate it. And they don't seem to realize that, as has very often been said, not least, I think, by Golda Meir. You know, if Hamas laid down its arms, if the Palestinian extremists, jihadists laid down their arms, there'd be peace. Whereas if Israel laid down its arms, there'd be no Jewish state. So when people say proportionality about Israel, what they want is, they want to signal, well, you do sort of have the right, maybe, to respond to the massacre, abduction, and rape of your citizenry, maybe, if you're Israel, but do reply with one hand tied behind your back, won't you? And don't win. That's what they're also saying. Whatever you do, don't win. Don't bring any of these wretched conflicts to a conclusion. Make sure you draw so that you end up stopping roughly at the point just before the conflict began.
Because people are terrified. People are so scared to go out there and support the victims in Israel, because they know that they will be met with a violent mob that wants to hurt them. It is sickening, Chris. It is so sickening seeing these Americans going around ripping down posters of babies and children and the elderly being held hostage. These useful idiots are supporting terrorists, and it should make every American citizen and every good person around the world sick. And I don't support cancel culture. We all know that as conservatives, we don't support cancel culture. But you know what? Good for the corporations who are rescinding job offers from a lot of these college kids who are being outed as supporting Hamas openly. They deserve to have their job offers rescinded and be publicly shamed for their behavior. It is disturbing and sickening.
At George Washington University, anti-Semitic phrases were projected onto a campus library. The university president issuing a statement saying the images do not speak on behalf of the university.
It is logically consistent. It is a logical outgrowth of where the left has been going for the past 40, 50 years or so. The only way I think this possibly stops is if people who have some sort of market power and can shift the supply and demand curves actually use that market power effectively. So to put some teeth on that, if you are a donor to an institution, you should not be giving a penny to any institution that has done anything other than unequivocally condemn Hamas and put the blame for this tragedy squarely on Hamas. If you are a parent, you should not be sending your schools to these universities, no matter how quote unquote prestigious they are, if they cannot take a very basic stand on this sort of stark issue, this morally dichotomous issue of good versus evil. Finally, if you are an employer or a graduate school admissions officer and someone who signed on to one of these appalling statements comes across your desk to be hired or admitted to graduate school, you should not hire or admit that person. So that is really the only way that this possibly ends, Rita. But unfortunately, as I wrote in that Daily Mail article, it has really been a very, very difficult 2 weeks, I think, for Jews all around the world, just to see this very ancient hatred rise yet again.
Stanford University found itself shrouded in controversy following a classroom incident that sparked outrage.
Stanford University, it's supposed to be a safe place for discourse, but students say when it comes to Israel and Gaza, it's anything but.
It was horrid. I mean, it's cruel. It's vicious what's going on campus.
There were anti-Israel banners on campus and chalk messages, too. Jewish students countered them by putting up photos of Israeli captives.
This is helping. It's a little bit uplifting.
There was also the Stanford lecturer placed on leave this week after reports he separated Israeli and Jewish students from the rest of a class.
We had an academic in America who, since the massacre of Jews a couple of weeks ago, announced that only 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, as if that was a sort of not a high enough number for him. He was at which university he was at? Oh, he was at Stanford. He was at Stanford. Here's a reprehensible woman called Mika Tosca, who teaches at the Art Institute of Chicago. This week, she described Israelis, Jews as pigs, savages, and irredeemable excrement. And she describes herself, by the way, Rita, as radically optimistic transsexual climate scientist. Well, good luck to her with her optimism, because if she was in the Gaza being her transsexual climate optimist self, I reckon she'd last about 24 hours at the hands of Hamas and co. But these people who are describing Jews as excrement and much more are doing so in the same week that a synagogue was firebombed in Berlin, as Jews in Berlin are waking up to find symbols outside their house to signal it's the house of a Jew. I mean, I know that there's only one historical lesson that our era seems to know anything about, and that's the 1930s and 1940s. But if anything could show you that people can do replays of that whilst thinking they're doing so in some different light, as if they are anti-fascist, and yet they all this language of fascism, of demeaning the Jews, of excommunicating the Jews, of othering the Jews. They want to find every crime of our era, including decolonization, and accuse the Jews of it. And it's been like that throughout the history of anti-Semitism. As I'll finish on this thought, if I may, but as Vasily Grossman says in his masterpiece Life and Fate, show me what you accuse the Jews of, and I'll show you what you're guilty of. All of these people making these disgusting claims, it's them that's guilty of the thing.
When Hamas attacked a music festival in Israel, at least 260 people were killed. The terrorist group used motorised paragliders to enter Israel and begin their attack on innocent partygoers. An anti-Israel group named Students for Justice in Palestine have used that shocking paraglider image on a flyer that is encouraging students to protest on their campus.
Grotesque response of students, especially in the United States, who've been launching endless pro-Hamas demonstrations, putting stuff onto buildings, beaming support for Hamas. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's been coming for a long time. I think that the educational system in the United States is on a decline. I mean, we just talked on the 5 about the fact that in Oregon, they don't care if you pass. They're just going to let you leave school and say you graduated. Look, for the longest time, we've dealt with young people in college. You know, my feelings are hurt. I need a corner to cry in. You need to understand how I feel. You know, the microaggressions, you know, how I feel, how you make me feel, how you should feel. It's all about feelings. Then all of a sudden, when they're confronted with grotesque, inhuman crimes, they're like, I support the other side.
They have no feelings for that, for the people that suffered? At all.
No.
I mean, at all.
And the reason, Piers, that I mentioned the tunnels is that Palestinians are nothing more than pawns to Hamas.
No.
Hamas is living well. The Palestinians are the pawns in this war.
I think the Palestinian people need to realise how bad Hamas have been
Hamas
for Palestinians.
Look, Israel said in 2005, we'll give you Hamas.
Judge?
The protests we are seeing do not represent the majority, with students at college campuses speaking out against what they are witnessing.
F*** the Jews. F*** the Jews. Those words were said not here in Amsterdam, not on Broadway. Those words were said in Jerome Green Hall, Columbia's law school building. To be clear, I know this incident in fact occurred because it happened to me. I was the one who the anti-Semite chose to direct that message to. Yesterday, on a Cornell online discussion forum, someone threatened to slit the throats of Jews. Jewish students were scared to leave their rooms, and the kosher dining hall was locked down. Last week, a mob of anti-Israel students trapped Jewish students in the Cooper Union Library. This is 2023. It is not 1942. And this is New York. It's not Nazi Europe.
Hate is what people on our college campus feel towards us as we walk by, simply because we are Jewish. Hate is when the head of a Columbia club puts out a statement saying that all Jews are white supremacists, oppressors, Nazis, and that no Zionists are allowed in the club. She also said that the Holocaust was not special. So when I'm asked, do you feel safe at Columbia University? I say no. Free Palestine!